This deep dive, this one takes us all the way to Japan, 1997.
Okay.
And it's the story of Boy A, but it's a case that
Yeah.
really shocked the nation.
Right.
And what's so fascinating about it is it happened in a country known for safety and order.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you wonder, like, what could lead to such horrific acts in a place like that?
Yeah, it really did shatter Japan's sense of security, and especially because this happened in Sumo Ward, which is part of Kobe, and Kobe was a city still recovering from the devastating earthquake
Oh, wow.
just 2 years before this. So, imagine like going through that as a community, trying to rebuild, trying to find that sense of normalcy, and then this wave of disturbing crimes begins.
Yeah, it started with mutilated cats appearing on the street.
Ugh.
I mean, it's just awful on its own, animal cruelty, but you have to wonder, was this like an early sign of something much darker to come?
Well, the escalation of violence is something that we see in a lot of cases like this, unfortunately. A lot of times it starts with animals and then it tragically progresses to humans. And that's exactly what happened in this case.
On March 16th, 10-year-old Ayaka Yamashita was brutally attacked. She later died from her injuries, and the perpetrator left behind a diary entry. This is going to send chills down your spine. I carried out sacred experiments today to confirm how fragile human beings are.
Chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that diary entry, it just gives us a small glimpse into the mind of the killer. Just this detached tone, the almost scientific language that he uses to describe this horrific act. I mean, it's really disturbing.
It is. And then just 2 months later, 11-year-old Jun Haas disappeared, and his decapitated head was found at the gate of his own school with a note signed Psycho Sakakibara, clearly meant to taunt the police. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Zodiac Killer reference is interesting because Boya actually had a book about the New York Zodiac copycat killer in his room.
Mhm.
So that, you kind of wonder, was he like emulating his hero? Was he trying to create his own terrifying persona?
It's definitely possible, especially given the note and the name that he chose, Saito Sakakibara. It's so deliberate. It's like he's trying to create this larger-than-life villain.
Absolutely. And I think the brutality of the crime, the note, the pseudonym, it all sent, shock waves through Japan.
Yeah.
Parents were terrified to let their children out of their sight. This is a country where it's normal for children to walk to school alone, run errands alone. So this case really struck at the heart of their societal norms.
Yeah, I can only imagine. The police were under so much pressure to find the killer, and they were looking for a man in his 30s,
Yeah.
possibly a former student at the school based on witness accounts.
And they were completely off the mark. It turned out the real culprit was hiding in plain sight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear about this.
So a tip about animal cruelty led them to a 14-year-old student at June High's school. Boy A.
It's a kid.
A kid.
I mean, that's insane. Not only was he so young, but he was someone who knew June Hayes. I mean, they attended the same school. This is just adding another layer of tragedy to this whole thing.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine the shock when they realized it was a kid? It wasn't some, unknown monster lurking in the shadows. He was a seemingly ordinary teenager. It makes you wonder, how could someone so young commit such horrific acts?
Yeah, that's the question that haunts, like, all of us, right? And as we, kind of delve deeper into Boye's background, we start to see a very complex and troubling picture kind of emerging. So, some neighbors describe him as a normal teenager, while some classmates revealed a history of animal cruelty.
Oh, wow.
And he was even expelled for a violent attack on another student.
That expulsion, I mean, it really raises so many questions. Were there, like, missed warning signs? Did the school fail to take this behavior seriously enough? Could any intervention have, prevented this escalation?
Yeah, it's a really tragic reminder that sometimes even the most blatant cries for help go unheard. Or worse, they're dismissed or minimized. And in this case, the consequences were absolutely devastating.
Absolutely. And in Boye's room, the police found this collection of disturbing materials. We're talking violent manga, horror movies, and of course that book about the New York Zodiac copycat killer.
Right.
And his diary was filled with these dark thoughts and these twisted justifications for his actions.
Yeah, it's like looking into the abyss of a troubled mind, and you see these disturbing influences, and you have to wonder, did they shape him, or were they simply a reflection of something that was already lurking within?
It's the age-old debate,
Yeah.
nature versus nurture. How much of who we are is predetermined,
Yeah.
and how much is shaped by our experiences in the world around us.
Yeah, it's a complex question with no easy answers, but I think what we can say for certain is that this case wasn't just about one boy's descent into darkness. It was a societal earthquake for Japan.
Yeah, the entire nation went into this period of soul searching after Boye's arrest. People were pointing fingers at violent media, demanding educational reform, and grappling with this overwhelming sense of how could this happen here?
Yeah, and I think it really forced Japan to kind of confront some uncomfortable truths about their own systems, their own values. There was this fear that the very fabric of their society was somehow unraveling.
And amidst all this chaos, this uncertainty, there was one quote from a mental health counselor at the time that really stuck with me. They said, "The boy wanted to communicate. He wanted to connect, but unfortunately he couldn't, and his anger and feelings accumulated because of his age."
Yeah, that quote, it really just kind of highlights that tragic element of isolation. It kind of speaks to that, need to connect that so many young people experience, especially the ones who are struggling. And it's just this reminder that sometimes the most troubled individuals are the ones who need our understanding the most.
So after his arrest, what happened to Boyd A? I mean, he was sentenced to a juvenile reformatory, right? What was life like for him there?
He was sentenced to a juvenile reformatory, and because of the severity of his crimes and the public outcry, the Japanese government actually lowered the age of criminal responsibility from 16 to 14.
Wow.
So that's how profoundly this case impacted their legal system.
Yeah?
And Boye spent several years in the reformatory and undergoing psychiatric treatment and counseling.
While lowering the age of criminal responsibility is a huge change. I mean, it just shows how seriously they were taking this case. Do you think they believed he could be rehabilitated?
Well, that's a question that was debated extensively. And, in 2004, at the age of 21, Boye was granted provisional release. So this meant that he wasn't completely free, but he was starting this gradual process back into society. And then full release followed in 2005.
I can only imagine how controversial that decision was. I mean, releasing someone who had committed such horrific crimes must have sparked so much fear and anger.
Absolutely. I mean, it really kind of, raised a lot of debate about, like, could he truly be rehabilitated? Does he still pose a risk to society? His lawyer actually appealed for anonymity, arguing that it was essential for his successful reintegration.
And what about his family? What was their reaction to his release?
Well, his mother actually released a statement, and in it, she expressed their hope that, the public would just watch over them quietly as, their son tried to navigate this new chapter. I mean, it must have been incredibly difficult for them to deal with the shame, the fear, the uncertainty of it all.
Yeah, I can't even fathom what they must have gone through. But then, just 5 months after his full release, he did something that thrust this entire case back into the public eye.
Yeah.
He published a memoir, right?
He did. He published a memoir titled Zaka, and he did so under his pseudonym Saito Sakakibara. And the book actually became a bestseller in Japan, although it's worth noting that some bookstores refused to carry it.
I bet that sparked a lot of outrage. What was so controversial about it?
Well, the book contains some really disturbing details about the murders, including these graphic descriptions of John Haas's death. He also wrote about his state of mind at the time, his twisted rationale, his fascination with violence.
So essentially, he was profiting off his crimes.
Yeah, and that was the main criticism that was leveled against him. People argued that it was insensitive, that it was exploitative, that he was re-traumatizing the families of his victims by forcing them to relive the horrors that he inflicted.
And what about the families? How did they react to the book?
They were devastated. Junas's father called it a betrayal, a complete trampling of their feelings. He felt that the apology that Boye offered in the book was very shallow, that it was insincere.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that sentiment. To have your child's murderer write a book detailing his crimes and then profit from it, it's unimaginable.
Yeah, and Ayaka Yamashita's mother, initially she had actually believed that Boye's annual letters of apology were genuine, but then, she was horrified to find them included in the memoir. It just felt like this calculated move to try to garner sympathy and try to manipulate public opinion.
Yeah, it really makes you question his motives for writing the book in the first place.
Okay.
Did it provide any real insights into his motivations, or was it just this self-serving attempt to control the narrative?
Well, I think some experts believe that the book offered a valuable, albeit disturbing, glimpse into the mind of a young killer. But then, others saw it as nothing more than a self-serving attempt to justify his actions. Ultimately, the memoir left more questions than answers.
The whole thing is just so unsettling. But then it gets even creepier because in 2015, he launched a website, didn't he?
He did. He called it The Unbearable Transparency of Being.
Just the title itself sends chills down my spine. I was on the website.
So the website was filled with strange and disturbing imagery. Photos of a naked man with his face covered, and often these were like photoshopped onto images of like scorpions or other creatures. It was like he was still obsessed with darkness, with like shocking and unsettling people.
It sounds like he was trying to reclaim that persona that he created back in 1997. Do you think he was seeking attention, or was it something deeper, darker?
It's hard to say for sure, but his attempt to like maintain this dark and mysterious persona backfired because in response to the website launch, a tabloid magazine actually exposed his real name, Shinichiro Azuma.
So his anonymity was blown. What happened then? Did they try to take the website down?
Well, his location was actually revealed to be in the Saitama Prefecture, which is like north of Tokyo. But as of 2021, his whereabouts are unknown, so he's not required to report to any parole board. He's free to live his life with no restrictions.
That's terrifying. I mean, he could be anywhere living an ordinary life while the families of his victims are still, grappling with their loss and the trauma of what he did.
Yeah, it is a chilling thought, and it really raises so many questions about, the nature of evil, the limits of rehabilitation, and the long shadow that these kinds of crimes cast on everyone involved.
It's like he just vanished. Like one minute he's posting this disturbing stuff online and the next he's gone.
Yeah.
And it leaves everyone to wonder where he is, what he's doing. I mean, it's unsettling.
It is. It really, I think, kind of highlights the complexities of justice and rehabilitation. I mean, what does true accountability look like in a case like this? Is it even possible to truly make amends for acts like these?
It feels almost impossible, especially for the families of the victims, just knowing that he's out there potentially living a normal life.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to the enduring trauma, not just for the families, but for, the entire community. It really left a permanent scar on the soul of Japan.
Thinking back on everything, it's hard to wrap my head around his motivations. Was it the violent media? Was it the pressure of societal expectations? Was it a mental illness that we just haven't grasped yet? Or was it something darker, something more fundamentally flawed?
I think that's the question that continues to haunt everyone that's kind of, followed this case. Was it a perfect storm of external factors, or was there just something inherently sinister lurking beneath the surface? And unfortunately, we may never have a definitive answer. The human psyche is a complex and often enigmatic thing.
It's a reminder that sometimes, even with all the analysis and investigation, there are just some mysteries we may never fully unravel.
And perhaps that's the most unsettling part of this case, the idea that someone could commit these acts seemingly out of nowhere, and that even after all these years, we're still left grappling with the why.
Yeah. It makes you realize that darkness can lurk in the most unexpected places, and that even in a society as seemingly ordered and safe as Japan, these horrors can and do occur.
So, after exploring this deeply disturbing case, what can we as individuals and as a society take away from this? What have we learned?
I mean, for me, it's a call to action to be more aware, to be more aware of the subtle signs of distress in those around us. Not in a fearful, like paranoid way, but just in a way that encourages us to be more present and connected to our communities, to reach out to those who seem isolated, to pay attention to any warning signs, to foster a culture of empathy and understanding.
I think that's a really powerful takeaway. We might not be able to predict or prevent every act of evil, but we can certainly strive to create a world where people feel seen, heard, and valued. A world where those struggling to cope can find support and guidance instead of being driven to these acts.
We spent this whole deep dive focused on Boye, his crimes, his motivations, the complexities of his rehabilitation. But I think as we conclude, it's crucial to shift our focus to those whose lives were tragically cut short, Junhaya and Ayaka Yamashita. Let's remember them. Let's honor their memory and let their stories serve as a stark reminder of the impact of violence and the importance of cherishing every precious moment.
Well said. Their stories should serve as a reminder to us all about the fragility of life and the enduring impact of these senseless acts. Let's never forget the victims.
This deep dive into the case of Boye has been a journey into the darkest corners of human behavior. It's left us with more questions than answers, but hopefully it's also sparked a sense of responsibility in all of us to be more vigilant, more compassionate, and more dedicated to creating a world where these tragedies become a distant memory. Thanks for joining us.